Deep in the shadows of a forgotten trunk, I found them, yellowed letters, their ink fading like ghosts clinging to the page. Each word carried the weight of a time when men faced terrors that defied reason, when the wilds of Africa whispered of death in every rustling leaf. In the spring of 1891, these letters exchanged between a governor, a hunter, and a man who would never return home unveiled a story so chilling it still haunts me. This is the tale of Charles E. Brady, Jack Thompson, and the man-eating lions of Luanga Valley, a nightmare etched in blood and courage. The air in Livingston, northern Rhodesia, was thick with the scent of dust and dread when Sir Arthur Ashbury, Governor, under Queen Victoria, penned his desperate plea. His office, a sanctuary of polished wood and colonial pride, felt suffocating as he wrote to Charles E. Brady, a name whispered with awe in London's grand halls and the colony's rugged outposts. Brady was no ordinary man. He was a legend, a big game hunter whose rifle had tamed the fiercest beasts of Africa. But this was no ordinary hunt. Reports from the Luanga Valley spoke of a lion, monstrous in size, its roar a harbinger of doom. It had torn through villages, leaving crops, trampled livestock, mangled, and human lives extinguished in its jaws. The natives' tales bordered on madness, a creature too vast, too cunning, its eyes glowing like embers in the night. Ashbury's pen trembled as he described the chaos fields reduced to ash, homes abandoned, and survivors whispering of a beast that hunted with purpose. Feel the weight of their fear. This was no mere predator. It was a force of nature, a specter that threatened the fragile order of the region. Ashbury begged Brady to come, offering supplies trackers and a reward that gleamed like gold. But he knew the true lure was the challenge, a chance for Brady to face a terror unlike any other. Step into the valley, and you'll never be the same. Imagine a firelit camp, the air heavy with the scent of earth and smoke, where Jack Thompson, a man of simple dreams, wrote to his wife, Margaret, under a sky alive with unseen eyes. Jack's letter, scrawled on rough paper, carried the weight of his love and fear. He was no hero like Brady, just a man who'd followed his master into the heart of Africa, driven by a promise of wealth that could lift his family from poverty. The Luanga Valley, with its tangled vines and shadowed rivers, was a world apart from their Yorkshire home, where Margaret rocked their children to sleep. Jack's words painted a vivid picture. The valley's beauty was a cruel deception, its emerald hills hiding death in every shadow. The lion they hunted was no ordinary beast. Its roar shook the earth, a sound that clawed at your soul. The natives, called it a demon, a spirit of vengeance born from the bush. Jack confessed his fear, his rifle cold in his hands, as he patrolled with Brady and their trackers. Each night, the cries of unseen creatures filled the air, and the fire's glow seemed too frail to hold back the darkness. You can't escape its eyes. Yet Jack clung to hope the governor's reward would secure a future for his children, a life of warmth and safety. He promised Margaret he'd return his love for her, anchoring him against the terror that grew with each passing day. Charles E. Brady's letter to Ashbury was a stark contrast to Jack's tender words. Written from a camp on the Luanga River, it was a grim report of failure and horror. When Brady arrived at the village, he found only silence, no laughter, no life, just the stench of death. The lion had struck before he could, leaving a scene of carnage, bodies torn apart, their faces frozen in terror, the ground soaked with blood. Among the dead was Ashbury's contact, a man whose name Brady never learned, now just another victim of the beast's savagery. The survivors had fled, leaving Brady with no leads. The valley itself seemed to conspire against him. Its dense jungles and winding rivers offered endless hiding places for a creature that struck and vanished like a phantom. Brady's words betrayed his frustration. This lion was unlike any he'd hunted. It was methodical, almost intelligent, choosing its moments with a predator's precision. He described the terrain vines that snagged at his boots, air so thick it choked his lungs, and a constant sense of being watched. "You're never alone here." Brady vowed to stay, to track the lion to its lair, but his letter carried a quiet dread. The cost of this hunt, he feared, would be measured in more than time. Jack's second letter to Margaret was a cry from the edge of despair, written under a moon that seemed to mock his courage. The hunt had taken a darker turn. Following the lion's bloody trail southward, Brady's team received word of new attacks in the north. At first, Jack dismissed it as panic, the kind that spreads like wildfire among the terrified. But the evidence was undeniable. There were 2 lions, not one. They hunted as a pair, a nightmare duo that struck with synchronized brutality, one in the south, the other in the north, leaving a trail of shattered lives. Jack's words dripped with fear. These weren't animals. They were something else, something evil. The natives' whispers of demons now felt all too real. He described the lion's tactics. One would draw attention with a brazen attack, while the other slipped through the shadows, killing silently. The valley's beauty had turned sinister. Its rivers glinted like blades. Its trees hid claws and teeth. Jack and Brady made a desperate plan to split their forces, with Jack heading north to protect the villages there. Feel the weight of that choice. Alone with only his rifle and his faith, Jack clung to thoughts of Margaret and their children. He begged for her prayers, his words a fragile shield against the darkness closing in. Charles E. Brady's final letter, addressed to Margaret Thompson, was a requiem for a hero. From a camp at Moamba Crossing, he wrote with a heavy heart, his words stained with grief. Jack Thompson was dead killed while defending a village from the lion's wrath. His courage burned brighter than the fire that lit that fateful night. Jack had stood his ground, facing the beasts, alone, his rifle blazing as he saved countless lives. His sacrifice gave Brady the time to regroup, to turn the tide against the lions. Brady's letter was both a confession and a tribute. He admitted that Jack had saved his life more than once, his steady hand and fearless heart guiding them through the valley's horrors. You can't unread these words. Jack's love for Margaret and their children had been his strength, his reason to fight when fear threatened to break him. Brady promised that Jack's body would be returned to England, laid to rest with honor. The governor had pledged support for Margaret and her family, but no amount of gold could fill the void Jack left behind. His name will echo in the valley forever. Brady vowed to continue the hunt, to end the lion's reign of terror, but his words carried a quiet resolve. This was no longer just a mission. It was personal. This is the story of the Luangwa Valley, where two men faced a terror that tested the limits of courage. Close your eyes, and you'll hear it, still the roar that never fades, the echo of a sacrifice that burns eternal. When I was 7, I learned that monsters don't hide under beds. They sit at your dinner table, smiling as they pour you milk. That Thanksgiving in 1983, our house smelled of burnt turkey and betrayal, and I saw my father try to kill my mother with a handful of pills. I'm older now, but the memory clings to me like damp rot, every detail sharp as a blade. This is my story, pieced together from a child's eyes and a woman's understanding. A tale of a family that crumbled under the weight of its own darkness. The house we lived in wasn't much a sagging 2-bedroom in a forgotten corner of the city, its walls stained with cigarette smoke and regret. My father was a ghost in our lives, always out working. Though I later learned his work was selling drugs to keep his own veins buzzing. My mother, barely out of her teens, was a shadow of the girl she'd once been. Her laughter drowned in cheap wine and despair. They were never meant to be together. She told me that years later, her voice heavy with the truth, but she always added that I was the one good thing to come from their wreckage. I was their daughter, caught in the crossfire of their mistakes, too young to understand the chaos, but old enough to feel its weight. Our home was a battlefield of silences and screams. My father's temper was a storm unpredictable and cruel, his words cutting deeper than any knife. My mother fought back with her own jagged edges, her sobriety a fragile thread that snapped too often. You could taste the tension in the air, thick as the grease on our stove. I'd learned to tiptoe around their fights, hiding in my room with a tattered book or a broken doll, waiting for the yelling to fade. But that November, my mother wanted something different. She wanted a real Thanksgiving, not another night of takeout and tears. She wanted us to be a family, just once. The idea felt like a dream, fragile and impossible, but I clung to it, imagining a table full of food and smiles. The days leading up to Thanksgiving were a blur of my mother's frantic energy. She scrubbed the kitchen until her hands bled, hauled out chipped plates from a cupboard that hadn't been opened in years, and spent money we didn't have on a turkey she didn't know how to cook. Her hope was a candle in a hurricane. I watched her, my small heart swelling with pride, believing this would be the moment everything changed. My father, when he was home, mocked her efforts, his laughter sharp and mean. "You'll burn the house down," he'd say, his eyes glinting with something darker than amusement. But he agreed to be there, promising to take a night off his business. I should have known his promises were poison. The afternoon of Thanksgiving arrived gray and cold, the sky pressing down like a lid on our little world. The house smelled of overcooked meat and desperation, the turkey a blackened lump in the oven. My mother's face was a mask of forced cheer, her hands trembling as she set the table with mismatched forks and a single candle flickering weakly. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a warning. My father slouched in his chair, his eyes bloodshot, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm on the table. I sat between them, my stomach knotted, sensing the storm brewing beneath their silence. Dinner was a disaster before it began. The turkey was inedible, the potatoes lumpy, and the wine, 2 bottles my mother had saved for my father, disappeared into her glass as her resolve crumbled. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. My father's voice rose, sharp and accusing, blaming her for ruining everything, for wasting his time. She shouted back, her words slurred, her face flushed with anger and shame. I shrank in my seat, my appetite gone, my eyes darting to the stairs. Run, hide, wait it out. That was my ritual, my way of surviving their wars. I slipped away, my bare feet silent on the worn carpet, and curled up in my room, clutching my doll, praying for the noise to stop. Time blurred in the dark. My stomach growled a sharp reminder of the meal that never was. Hunger pulled me back downstairs, a traitor to my fear. The house was quiet now, an unnatural stillness that felt heavier than the shouting. I crept down the stairs, my heart thudding, the candle's faint glow spilling from the living room. The TV room, a cramped space with a sagging couch and a flickering screen, was the only way to the kitchen. Something was wrong. I pushed the door open, and the air turned thick, sour, with a smell I couldn't name: sweat, wine, and something sharper, like medicine gone bad. My mother was sprawled on the couch, her body limp, her breathing shallow and strange, a low moan escaping her lips. My father knelt beside her, his back to me, his hands moving with a purpose that chilled my blood. He wasn't helping her. He held a glass of water in one hand, a small white pill in the other, pressing it into her mouth with a gentleness that felt wrong, like a predator toying with its prey. She coughed, her head lolling, but he tilted the glass, forcing her to swallow. Then another pill, and another, his voice low and soothing words I couldn't catch, but felt like lies. "You're not safe here." My stomach rumbled again, loud in the silence, and my father's head snapped toward me. His eyes were empty, a stranger's eyes. For a moment, fear flashed across his face, but it vanished, replaced by a smile that didn't reach his soul. "Just getting some snacks, huh?" he said, his voice too bright, too wrong. He stood, brushing his hands on his jeans, and gestured to the kitchen. "Go on, take whatever you want. Candy, chips, anything." I nodded, my throat tight, my legs moving on their own. "Don't look back." I grabbed a candy bar and a bag of chips, my hands shaking, the rustle of the wrapper deafening in the quiet. As I passed through the TV room again, my father was back at my mother's side, a large cooking pan in his hands. She was leaning over it, retching her body, heaving as he rubbed her back, murmuring words of comfort that sounded rehearsed. "He's hiding something." His fingers brushed her lips, and I thought he was clearing her mouth. But now I know better. He was checking, making sure the pills were gone, purging her stomach to cover his crime. I didn't understand then, but my child's instincts screamed that this was wrong, that the man who was supposed to protect us was the danger. I ate my candy in my room, the sweetness sour on my tongue, the house's silence pressing against my ears. What had I seen? My mother's moans, my father's strange calm. The pills, they swirled in my mind, pieces of a puzzle I was too young to solve. Downstairs, life went on, or so it seemed. My mother woke the next morning, her throat raw, her body weak but alive. My father played the concerned husband, his lies smooth as glass. He thought he'd won, but my mother wasn't fooled for long. Days later, she found it a single white pill, half dissolved, tucked under the couch. It was the truth staring back at her. She knelt on the carpet, sniffing the faint vomit stain, her hands trembling as she pieced it together. The missing medicine bottles, the soreness in her throat, the memory of that night, it all clicked. She confronted my father, her voice steady for the first time in years. He spun a story claiming she'd taken the pills herself, that he'd saved her. But she saw through him. His lies were a house of cards collapsing under the weight of her certainty. We left soon after, my mother and I, our belongings stuffed into a battered suitcase. The house stayed behind, but its shadows followed. She never told me the full story, not then. But as I grew older, she shared enough. My father had wanted us gone, not just out of his life, but erased, and he'd nearly succeeded. What if I hadn't walked in? The question haunts me, a ghost that lingers in quiet moments. Would he have turned on me next, his own daughter, a loose end in his twisted plan? I'll never know. But the fear of it is a scar I carry, etched deep in my bones. This is my truth, the one I've carried from that Thanksgiving night. Our family was a lie built on broken promises and buried secrets. My mother saved us her strength, a light in the darkness, but the cost was a childhood lost to fear. Close your eyes and you'll see it, the couch, the pills, the man who was my father, his hands steady as he tried to end us. Some monsters wear human faces, and I learned that lesson before I learned to read. November 2011, and I stepped into a house that gleamed like a polished lie, where the scent of roasted turkey masked a secret so vile it would shatter a family. I was there for Holly, my girlfriend, but I walked into a nightmare that still claws at my dreams. That Thanksgiving in North Jersey wasn't about gratitude. It was about a truth buried for decades, unearthed in a way that left us all broken. This is my story, seen through the eyes of a man who thought he was ready to meet his girlfriend's family, only to witness their darkest hour. The invitation came from Holly in early November, her voice tight with nerves. She wanted me at her parents' Thanksgiving, not just to meet her mom and dad, but to be her anchor in a storm she knew was coming. Her family wasn't what it seemed. Holly was an only child, raised in a world of wealth and tension, where holiday gatherings were battlegrounds. Her paternal grandfather, a bitter old man, and her father rarely spoke without sparks flying. But this year, the real danger was Aunt Janet, a woman who'd vanished from their lives for nearly 20 years, now returning under a cloud of mystery. You don't just come back after that long without a reason. Holly warned me it could get ugly. Her eyes shadowed with dread, but I was too smitten to back out. I wanted to prove I was serious about her, about us. The drive to North Jersey was quiet. Holly's hands gripping the steering wheel, her silence louder than any words. Something was waiting for us, something heavy. Her parents' house was a vision of suburban perfection, a red brick colonial with white columns, a manicured lawn, and flower beds tucked in for winter. Inside, it was a cathedral of wealth, a 2-story foyer with a chandelier that glittered like ice hardwood floors, polished to a mirror shine, and a dining room with coffered ceilings that screamed money. But beauty can hide rot. The air carried the warm scent of baked ziti and roasted vegetables, but beneath it was a faint staleness, like secrets trapped in the walls. Holly's parents greeted us with practiced smiles, her mother's hug too tight, her father's handshake firm but wary. They were playing their parts. We settled in the family room, its leather couches and stone fireplace, cozy yet suffocating. Holly's dad was stern, but warmed to me after a few questions, satisfied I wasn't some drifter after his daughter's heart. Cousins, aunts, and uncles trickled in their laughter, filling the space. But the mood shifted when Holly's grandfather arrived. His presence was a cold wind. He was a tall, grizzled man, his face etched with lines of resentment, his eyes scanning the room like a predator sizing up prey. He barely acknowledged me, dismissing me as an outsider with a wave of his hand. "You're not welcome here." "Not really." Holly leaned close, her breath warm against my ear. "It's just the start," she whispered, her voice trembling. She knew something I didn't. Her grandfather's arrival was a spark in a room full of gasoline. But the real explosion was still to come. Aunt Janet, the prodigal sister, was the wild card. Holly had painted her as a ghost, someone who'd left town in her 20s, cutting ties without explanation, only to resurface now, her motives unclear. Her father had insisted on inviting her, hoping for reconciliation. But Holly's gut screamed trouble. Trust that feeling. I brushed off her warnings, thinking I could handle a little family drama. I was wrong. As the afternoon unfolded, the house buzzed with forced cheer. Cousins sprawled on couches, beer bottles in hand, while kids darted around with plates of snacks. The noise was a mask hiding the cracks. Holly's mother moved through the kitchen, her Italian heritage shining in the spread shrimp cocktails, baked clams, a charcuterie board, and ziti instead of mashed potatoes. The food was a masterpiece, each bite rich with garlic and butter, but the warmth of the meal couldn't thaw the chill in the air. Something was coming, and it wasn't dessert. Aunt Janet arrived just before dinner, her presence like a shadow crossing the sun. She was older than Holly's father, her hair streaked with gray, but she carried herself with a quiet strength that drew every eye. She wasn't here for pleasantries. In her hands was a large portfolio bag, the kind artists use, its purpose a mystery that set my nerves on edge. The room paused as she entered, her siblings rushing to embrace her tears, glinting in their eyes. Even her father, Holly's grandfather, managed a stiff nod, though his jaw was tight. The reunion felt like a truce, fragile and temporary. Janet's smile was warm, but guarded her eyes, scanning the room, lingering on her father, with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Dinner was a feast, the table groaning under the weight of food. We ate in silence, at first the clink of forks deafening. Conversation started slowly, cousins trading stories, aunts sipping wine, but the tension never left. Holly's hand found mine under the table, her fingers cold, her grip tight. She was waiting for the storm. After dessert, as Holly's mother began clearing plates, Janet stood her portfolio bag in hand. "I have something for everyone," she said, her voice steady but sharp, like a blade hidden in silk. "Pay attention, now." She proposed a parlor game, a word association exercise to catch up after her long absence. The room buzzed with curiosity, but Holly's grip tightened her eyes, wide with fear. Janet set up a portable whiteboard, its legs creaking as she unfolded them and pulled out a marker. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. She wrote the first word, school. We went around the table, tossing out answers. Lunch, teacher homework, football. Innocent words, safe words. But Janet's smile didn't reach her eyes. She moved to boathouse, then bear, then truth. Each word prompting a cascade of responses, scribbled in neat rows like a mind map. I said, Teddy for bear. Holly said grizzly. Her father said hunt. Janet wrote them all, her hand steady, her face unreadable. She was building something, but what? When she stepped back, the whiteboard was a web of words, a puzzle we didn't yet understand. "What do you see?" she asked, her voice soft but commanding. "Look closer." No one answered the silence, thick with unease. Then Janet spoke her words, slicing through the room like a guillotine. "You see normal answers, the kind regular people give. Mine are different." Her eyes locked on her father, and the room froze. "For school," she said, "sick," her voice trembling with memory. "I took so many sick days, didn't I, Dad? But I wasn't sick. Not really. You called the school, said I was too ill to go. You had other plans for me." The air turned to ice. Holly's grandfather grumbled, his face reddening, but Janet pressed on. Her words were a weapon now. "Boathouse," she said, her voice breaking. "Not fishing trips or summer fun. Pain. That summer in upstate New York, when I was just a girl, you dragged me into that boathouse. It wasn't a talk you gave me, was it? It hurt so bad, I couldn't sit for days. The truth was a bomb, and it was detonating." Her father's face twisted, denial spilling from his lips, but Janet's voice rose, cutting through his protests. "Bear," she said, pointing to our answers. "You all said Teddy Grizzly. I said distraction, delusion. You gave me those bears to hold, to keep me quiet, while you did things no father should ever do." The room gasped, a collective intake of breath that felt like the world cracking open. "You can't unhear this." Holly's aunts were sobbing, her father's face pale as death. Janet's voice was a scream, now raw and unstoppable. "Truth," she said, pointing to the final word. "You all see hope, justice. I see pain. My whole life, I wondered if anyone would believe me, if I'd ever find the courage to say it. I planned this moment, called you, asked to come back, because I needed you to know what he did to me." Her finger stabbed toward her father, and the room exploded. Holly's grandfather surged to his feet, his face a mask of rage, screaming words I won't repeat. He was unraveling a monster exposed. Janet screamed back, her voice a raw wound, years of pain pouring out. Holly's aunts wept. Her father looked like he might collapse, his hands shaking as he stared at his father. The truth was a poison, and it was spreading. I reached for Holly's hand, her skin clammy, her eyes fixed on the chaos, unblinking, like she was trapped in a nightmare. "We can leave," I whispered, but she didn't move, didn't speak. Then it happened. Her grandfather vanished into the kitchen, and the air turned deadly. He returned, and a hand behind his back his steps slow and deliberate. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Holly's father saw it first, a glint of steel, and he lunged, shouting, "Dad, no!" The knife flashed in the old man's hand, raised high, aimed at Janet. Time stopped. Janet stumbled back, her eyes wide with terror, as her brother tackled their father, pinning his arm. The knife clattered to the floor, and the room erupted. Screams, sobs, chairs scraping as guests fled. "You can't stay here." Janet grabbed her whiteboard, packing it with shaking hands, her voice breaking as she shouted, "You'll never see me again." She stormed out, leaving a void in her wake. Holly's aunts clung to each other, their cries echoing in the grand dining room. Her father sat head in hands, the weight of his sister's truth crushing him. The family was broken, and I was a witness to its ruin. I pulled Holly toward the door, her body limp, her eyes vacant. We drove home in silence, the night swallowing us whole. She didn't speak for days, didn't leave her bed for a week, shutting out everyone but me and a few friends. She was lost in that moment, and I couldn't reach her. Our relationship didn't survive. Some wounds don't heal. Holly couldn't talk about that night, and I couldn't force her. We drifted apart, the memory of that Thanksgiving, a wall between us. I still think of her wonder if she's found peace, if her family ever rebuilt from the ashes of Janet's truth. I'll never know, but I'll never forget. That night, I saw a family unravel, a secret tear them apart, and a truth so heavy it left scars on us all. Close your eyes, and you'll feel it, the weight of a truth too terrible to bear. Some nights, the woods don't just whisper, they scream. In the autumn of 1925, my grandfather walked the shadowed paths of Capsthorne Hall and met something that wasn't. Man wasn't beast, but something older, hungrier. Its eyes still burn in my dreams, pulled from the pages of his journal. I found his words among dusty relics after he passed each sentence, a window into a terror that clung to him until his final breath. This is his story, written in ink and fear of a night that changed him forever in the wilds of rural England. I was a boy of 20 when I stepped onto the grounds of Capsthorne Hall, my heart full of dreams and my hand empty of prospects. The English countryside was my home, but it was also my prison. I'd grown up wandering its woods, learning the calls of pheasants and the tracks of deer, my soul bound to the land's rhythms. The estate, a sprawling manor of gray stone and ivy, loomed over the village like a silent giant, its towers piercing the mist. I wanted to be its game warden, to protect its wildlife, and walk its paths with purpose. You don't choose this life, it chooses you. The interview with Mr. Walkinshaw, the estate manager, was no warm welcome. His office smelled of pipe smoke and old leather, his eyes sharp as he studied my letter of recommendation from the village rector. "This isn't a job for a lad like you," he said, his voice gravelly, his gaze cutting through me. He saw my youth, not my hunger. I pleaded my case, my words tumbling out, my knowledge of the land, my love for its creatures, my willingness to learn. He dismissed me with a wave, but as I turned to leave, his voice stopped me. "Come back tomorrow. We'll see if you're serious." That was my first warning, and I ignored it. The next morning, I returned my boots, polished, my resolve steeled. Walkinshaw took me on a walk through the estate's grounds, his questions relentless. Could I track a fox by its prints? Could I mend a pheasant pen? Could I face a poacher in the dark? I answered with confidence, showing him deer trails, identifying bird calls, proving I belonged. He nodded, his face unreadable, and spoke of trust. The landowners, he said, hosted hunts for wealthy guests, and my job was to ensure their privacy, to keep the estate's secrets. Secrets. The word hung in the air, heavy with meaning I couldn't yet grasp. By day's end, he offered me the job, along with a small cottage on the estate's edge. I thought I'd won. I was wrong. My duties began at once solitary, but satisfying. I checked pheasant pens, repaired fences, set traps for foxes, and patrolled the grounds after dark. The land was alive, and I was its guardian. The work was hard, but it filled me with pride. Poachers were a constant threat, their snares hidden in the underbrush, their footsteps faint but traceable. I learned to move quietly, my lantern a soft glow in the night, my shotgun a steady weight in my hands. The woods were my kingdom, but they were also a maze. Each night, I felt the land watching me. Its silence, not empty, but waiting. Autumn came, and the air turned crisp, the leaves rustling with secrets of their own. The nights grew longer, and so did the shadows. I'd noticed the pheasants were restless, their calls sharp and frantic, as if something prowled too close. I suspected a fox bold enough to skirt my traps and doubled my patrols near the woods bordering the moors. You can feel it before you see it. One night, clear and still, I walked the gamekeeper's path, my lantern casting a golden pool around me. The air was heavy, the kind that presses against your chest, making every breath a choice. Something was out there, near an ancient oak, gnarled and twisted like a sentinel. I heard it, a low, guttural growl that wasn't fox or deer or anything I knew. It wasn't natural. The sound came from the deep woods beyond the reach of my light, and it sent a shiver down my spine. I tightened my grip on the shotgun, my pulse loud in my ears. You can't run now. I stepped forward, my boots crunching on fallen leaves, and saw it just beyond the trees where the shadows thickened into something alive. At first, I thought it was a man crouched low, but its shape was wrong. Its shoulders were too broad, its limbs too long, its movements too fluid, like water poured from a nightmare. The moonlight caught its eyes, yellow and gleaming, not with the dull glow of a beast, but with a knowing, a hunger. Those eyes saw me, saw through me. Its mouth opened, revealing teeth, sharp, and too many set in a jaw that stretched too wide. My heart pounded, my breath shallow, as I tried to make sense of it. Was it a man in a twisted costume? An animal warped by disease? No answer. Fit. Its body was covered in coarse, dark fur, its claws glinting as they scraped the earth. I raised my shotgun, my voice steadier than I felt. Who's there? You already know. It's not human. The creature straightened, towering over me, taller than any man. Its presence, a weight that pinned me in place. You can't move, can you? Its growl deepened, vibrating in my chest, a sound that felt like the earth itself was warning me. I fired a shot into the air, the crack splitting the night, sending birds scattering from the trees. It didn't flinch. Instead, it let out a howl, low at first, then rising into a piercing wail that clawed at my mind. You'll hear it forever. My legs screamed to run, but duty held me fast. I took a step back, then another, my lantern swinging wildly, its light dancing on the creature's form. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it turned dropping to all fours with a grace that chilled me. It didn't need to chase me. It melted into the shadows, leaving only the echo of its howl and the weight of its gaze. I stood frozen, my breath ragged, my shotgun trembling in my hands. You're still alive. But why? The woods were silent now, unnaturally, so as if every creature held its breath. I stumbled back to my cottage, the night heavier, the stars dimmer. You're not alone anymore. The next morning, I found Mr. Walkinshaw in his office, my hands still shaking as I recounted the encounter. I expected laughter, disbelief, but his face was calm, his eyes knowing, as if I'd told him The sky was blue. "You saw it then," he said, his voice low. He knew. He told me the creature was no threat, not to me, not to the estate. It was Lord Capsthorne's pet. He said a thing that had haunted these woods for centuries. Centuries. The word sank into me, cold and heavy. He warned me not to speak of it, not to hunt it. Killing it would bring ruin. He said, his eyes dark with secrets. "You'll obey, won't you?" I nodded, but my mind reeled. What was it? A beast, a spirit, a curse. Walkinshaw's calm chilled me more than the creature's growl. I returned to my duties, but the woods were no longer mine. They belonged to it. Each night, I carried a heavier lantern, extra shells, and a prayer I whispered to myself. The pheasants still called, the foxes still prowled, but I felt its eyes, always watching, always waiting. You'll never walk alone again. This is the story my grandfather left behind, written in a journal that smells of dust and fear. Close your eyes, and you'll feel it, the weight of those yellow eyes, the howl that never fades. A single word can unravel your world. On a Thanksgiving, not long ago, my phone buzzed with a message from Uncle Tony High. Just one word, but it carried a darkness that tore my family apart. I stood in my parents' driveway, the smell of wood smoke and roasted turkey in the air, expecting a warm holiday. Instead, I walked into a nightmare where texts from a dead man's phone revealed a truth too horrific to comprehend. This is my story, a memory of a day that started with laughter and ended with a scream that still echoes in my mind. The November air was crisp, the kind that bites your cheeks and smells of burning leaves as I pulled into my parents' driveway. It felt like stepping back into childhood, but something was off. Their house, a modest 2-story with faded shutters, was alive with the chaos of family. Cars lined the street, cousins' voices spilled from the windows, and the aroma of my mother's cooking, turkey, spiced pies, buttery rolls, wrapped around me like a promise of home. But promises break. I was the unmarried uncle, always late, always slipping in after a morning at work. But today felt different. The sky was too gray, the air too heavy, as if the world knew what was coming. Inside the house was a whirlwind of warmth and noise. You can't help but smile, can you? My mother pulled me into a hug, her apron dusted with flour, her eyes bright with the joy of having everyone together. The living room was packed, cousins sprawled on couches, beer bottles raised in greeting kids weaving through legs with plates of crackers and cheese. It was perfect until it wasn't. My aunts and uncles sat around the kitchen table, sipping wine, trading stories, while my mother stirred a pot on the stove, her laughter mingling with the clatter of pans. I scanned the room, counting faces, and asked, "Is this everyone?" My mother's smile faltered. "Just waiting on Tony," she said, her voice tight. "You feel it too, don't you?" Uncle Tony was the baby of the family, barely 10 years older than me in his early 40s. He was quiet, reserved, the kind of man who'd rather listen than talk. He didn't belong in the spotlight, but he was about to steal it. Tony lived out of state, a 4-hour drive away, and he always timed his arrival to avoid the small talk slipping in just as dinner was served. I figured he'd stroll in soon, his usual half-smile in place, ready to eat, and fade into the background. But as the clock ticked closer to dinner, my mother's glances at her phone grew more frequent, her brow creasing. Something's wrong. Half an hour before the meal, she asked me to text Tony for his ETA. "You'd do it too, wouldn't you?" I sent a quick message, expecting no reply. He'd be driving after all. The dining room was set, the table groaning under turkey stuffing, and my mother's famous pumpkin pie with hand-whipped cream. The smell was heaven, but the mood was souring. 5 minutes to dinner, and still no Tony. My mother handed me her phone. "Call him," she said, her voice sharp with worry. I dialed, and once, twice, the calls dropping to voicemail faster than they should. He's close. He has to be. I told myself he'd declined the call to avoid a ticket, that he was just blocks away. My mother wasn't convinced. We sat down to eat, the clink of glasses and forced laughter filling the silence. But you can't ignore the empty chair. My mother kept checking her phone, her fingers tapping nervously, while the rest of us passed plates, pretending everything was fine. My aunts and uncles checked their phones too, just in case. But there was nothing. No texts, no calls. He's always late, but not like this. An hour into dinner, with pie half eaten, the mood shifted from casual concern to something heavier. We started calling again, texting, our messages piling up unanswered. You know that feeling when the silence screams louder than words. Then my phone buzzed. One word. "Hi." I stared at the screen. Uncle Tony's name glowing. But that single word felt wrong, like a stranger wearing his face. It's not him. I showed my mother, her eyes narrowing, and before we could process it, other phones lit up. One by one, my aunts, uncles, my father, each got the same message. "Hi. You feel the chill now, don't you?" The room went quiet. Forks paused mid-air as we read the texts aloud. Confusion turned to unease, the word hi echoing like a taunt. My mother dialed Tony's number, her face pale, but the call went straight to voicemail. He's not answering, and he never will. We sent a flurry of texts. Are you okay? Call us our fingers, moving faster than our thoughts. You'd do the same, desperate for a sign. My phone buzzed again, and my stomach dropped. Hope I haven't left you all waiting, Lowell. It read the casual tone, jarring nothing like Tony's careful words. This isn't him. I typed, "Who is this?" My hands shaking, the room's warmth fading. The reply came in seconds. Thumbelina. What the hell does that mean? I stood, my voice steady as I lied. I'm calling a friend of his. Maybe he's drunk somewhere. My family's faces were skeptical, but I couldn't tell them the truth, not yet. In the kitchen, away from their eyes, I dialed 911, my heart pounding. You can't wait anymore. The operator's calm voice felt like a lifeline as I explained the texts. The absence, the fear gnawing at my gut. My uncle followed me, his face grim, and soon the others knew something was wrong. You can't hide it now. Phones buzzed again, more messages from Tony's number, each one colder, crueler. No more Thanksgivings for him. Gone for good. You're reading his epitaph. My mother clutched her chest, her eyes wet, while my aunts fanned themselves, their voices breaking in prayer. Please let this be a joke, but it wasn't. The police called back their words, a hammer to my heart. Uncle Tony was dead. They'd found him in his car, parked in a deserted lot near a shuttered business, a bullet hole through his head. You can't unsee that image. His phone was gone, but hours later, they tracked it to a diner a few miles away. The girl holding it was young, small, her face blank as she typed another message. She'd cut off his thumb. The police found it in her pocket, still warm, used to unlock his phone and taunt us with her twisted game. You'll never forget that detail. She was arrested, her hands cuffed as she tried to finish one last text, gloating to Tony's coworker about his death. She was madness in human form. The police said she was unhinged, locked away in a hospital after 5 minutes with a psychiatrist. They guessed she was a hitchhiker, that Tony had stopped to help her, but that never sat right. Tony didn't stop for strangers. He was reserved, almost selfish, the kind of man who'd drive past a broken-down car without a glance. My mother said he'd been that way since childhood, avoiding human connection like a plague. So why did he stop? The question haunts us. What made him pull over. Was she hurt, begging for help? Her small frame disarming enough to crack his walls? Or was there something else, something darker that drew him to her? You'll never know. And that's the worst part. The house that night was a shell. The warmth of Thanksgiving drained away. My cousins sat in silence. The kids sent upstairs, unaware of the horror. My mother's sobs filled the kitchen. My father's face carved with grief. We were a family, but we were broken. I drive by that diner. Sometimes, its neon sign flickering in the dark, and I wonder about her. What kind of person does that? Cuts a man's thumb, sends texts to his family, laughs as she types. I think of Tony, his quiet smile, his solitary life, and the mystery of his final moments. You can't escape the questions. They linger like the smell of wood smoke on that November night, a reminder that some truths are too heavy to carry. Close your eyes and you'll feel it, the buzz of a phone, the weight of a word that changes everything. In the heart of Virunga, where the jungle breathes death, I learned fear isn't just a feeling, it's a predator. In 2018, I walked into a war zone disguised as a national park, and the bullets weren't the worst of it. My name's etched in the scars of that place. A former soldier turned ranger, fighting to save animals from poachers and rebels who'd sell the world for a profit. But something darker was at play. Something that left my friend Yuri dead, and questions that still burn. This is my story, carved from the mud and blood of Congo's wilds. I wasn't made for desks or 9-to-5s. The army gave me purpose, and when it broke me, I lost everything. From 2009 to 2017, I served as an infantryman in the British Army's Duke of Lancaster's regiment. My life shaped by the structure of orders and the chaos of combat. Afghanistan in 2013 was my crucible, mentoring Afghan soldiers through dust and danger. But a training accident in Wales shattered my back and my dreams, leaving me medically discharged at 30. You don't know lost until you're cut loose. Civilian life was a blur of dead-end jobs, each one duller than the last, my patience fraying with every clock I punched. Then a mate from the regiment called with an offer that felt like salvation, a job in Virunga National Park, Congo, protecting endangered animals from poachers. You'd take it. Too, wouldn't you? Virunga was a battlefield, not a sanctuary. The jungle doesn't care about your ideals. The Democratic Republic of Congo was a cauldron of civil wars, its national parks overrun by militias and criminals who hunted gorillas and elephants for profit. By 2018, Virunga's rangers were dying 175 in a decade, ambushed by poachers allied with rebels like the FDLR. The European Union poured money into the Virunga Foundation, hiring foreign volunteers like me to train rangers and patrol the park. It wasn't a job. It was a death sentence. The pay was good, but the risks were insane. Snipers, mortars, and a jungle that could kill you a dozen ways before breakfast. I signed up anyway, my blood itching for purpose again. I landed in Goma at 4 a.m., the air thick with humidity and the smell of diesel. You feel the weight of this place. My contact, a former Green Beret called Top, met me at the airport. He wasn't the Chuck Norris I'd pictured, more like a grizzled rock star with a lion claw necklace and a beard streaked with silver. He was real, though. His voice carried the weight of wars fought, and secrets kept his near-fluent Swahili, a testament to years in the region. We drove 2 hours to a small airstrip, then flew over Lake Edward in a rattling plane that felt like it might drop into the water's vast glassy expanse. You're not in England anymore. The lake stretched 897 square miles, dwarfing anything I'd seen, a reminder of Africa's scale and indifference. Ishango Camp was our base, a cluster of huts and solar panels nestled among trees. It was alive, but it was tense. The rangers' homes sat opposite our volunteer quarters, a mess hall, and armory nearby, even a football pitch for rare moments of rest. I met the team, Paddy, an Irish reservist with a quick laugh, Tanner, a Texan sharpshooter with a backwards name, Manu, a French veteran from Mali, Nick, an American animal lover, and Yuri, a Moldovan giant who hated Russians and loved animals more than people. Yuri was different. A vegetarian mercenary he worked for, free, driven by a hatred for poachers. They're rats, he'd say, his voice like gravel. Kill them now, or they'll eat everything. You can't argue with that. Patrolling Virunga was a gauntlet. The jungle was a killer, and it didn't choose sides. The Semliki River's banks were thick with mud that sucked at your boots, the air heavy with the buzz of insects and the stench of decay. Elephants and hippos could charge without warning, their bulk unstoppable. Spiders and scorpions hid in the underbrush, their bites a burning agony. But the snakes were worse. Kabuzun vipers blended into the leaves, their venom a death sentence if you didn't reach a medic fast. Bats carried rabies, maybe Ebola, their guano, a hazard we scrubbed from our skin with panic. Bees and wasps could chase you for miles, their stings a swarm of pain. You're never safe here. Then there were the tsetse flies, small but deadly, carrying sleeping sickness. You don't see them coming. A bite started with headaches, fever, joint pain. Nothing special at first. But then the parasite hit your brain, twisting your personality, stealing your sleep until you slipped into a coma and didn't wake up. You check your skin every night, don't you? We all did our flashlights, sweeping over arms and legs, praying we'd missed their bite. The rangers, Congolese and foreign alike, lived in fear of those flies, their threat as real as any bullet. But the human enemies were worse. Poachers and rebels didn't just kill animals, they hunted us. Their AKs, machine guns, and mortars outmatched our rifles and shotguns. My first patrol was a baptism by fire, a sniper's bullet whistling past my head as we moved through tall grass. You hit the dirt, heart pounding. They were sloppy shots, aiming for elephants, not precision, but their numbers and weapons made them deadly. We couldn't fire back freely. Every shot risked the wildlife we swore to protect. It's not like Afghanistan. There we'd call in airstrikes. Here we ducked and prayed our hands tied by the park's rules. The Ruwenzori Mountains were the rebels' stronghold, their slopes a maze of traps and ambushes. You feel their eyes, always watching. One patrol we crossed, open ground checking for poacher snares, when a sound like a jet engine tore through the air. It wasn't a plane. A mortar shell screamed down its wail, amplified by the jungle's damp air. A banshee's cry that froze my blood. You can't outrun it. It hit a tree, splintering it into a shower of wood and shrapnel. I saw a ranger fall a splinter the size of my arm through his face, his body limp before he hit the ground. You'll see that forever. Another took an RPG, hit the blast, cutting him in half, his screams lingering too long. You can't unhear that. Nick the American caught a bullet in the shin, a hole so big we thought he'd lose the leg. Yuri carried him, swearing like a storm. My mom's gonna kill me. Nick mumbled his mind on home, not the jungle. We got him to the medics, but the cost was mounting. You count the bodies, don't you? The worst came near the end of my 6 months manning listening posts in the forest at night. Darkness here isn't empty, it's alive. We spread out 3/4 of a mile, waiting for poachers who hunted at dawn. The jungle was a symphony of unseen threats, skittering insects, distant roars, the rustle of leaves that could be wind, or worse. Then it happened. A radio clicked, and the world exploded. One ranger went down, a bullet through his chest. Another leaned out, searching for a muzzle flash, and took a shot between the eyes. They could see us. Night vision, maybe thermal equipment we didn't have. Your fish in a barrel. Bullets cracked over our heads, each one a promise of death. We ran exposed the jungle, swallowing our screams. You're next, you know it. Of the 20 rangers that night, only 6 made it back. Yuri wasn't one of them. He was a giant, but giants fall. His body lay somewhere in the dark, a sacrifice to the animals he loved. The attacks stopped soon after the rebels' boldness fading. But why Top heard a rumor on the Special Forces grapevine Chinese mercenaries hired by smuggling rings had been in North Kivu, their gear explaining the night vision. You believe it now, don't you? They'd come, killed, and vanished, leaving us to wonder who was really pulling the strings. I read about the 19th century scramble for Africa-European powers carving up the continent. It's happening again. China's roads, their money, their shadows. Virunga was just a piece in a larger game, and we were pawns. I left Congo with scars and questions. You don't come back whole. Yuri's voice, his hatred for poachers, his love for the wild, it stays with me. Close your eyes, and you'll feel it. The jungle's pulse, the scream of a mortar, the weight of a friend who didn't make it. I've seen evil in many forms, but none as cold as Lowell Lee Andrews. In November 1958, in a quiet Kansas town, he turned a Thanksgiving night into a slaughter, his family's blood staining the pages of history. As a journalist, piecing together his story from police reports, court records, and whispered accounts, I felt the chill of his actions seep into my bones. This is the tale of a boy who seemed ordinary until he picked up a rifle and erased his family, leaving behind a legacy of questions and fear. You'll never look at a small town the same way. Walcott, Kansas, in 1958 was a postcard of rural America, its fields golden under the autumn sun, its streets lined with white picket fences. It looked safe, didn't it? The Andrews family lived in a modest house on a quiet lane, their lives woven into the town's fabric. William, 50, was a steady man, his hands calloused from years at the railroad. Opal, 42, was the heart of the home, her smile warm but tired. Their daughter, Jenny, 20, was studying to be a teacher, her dreams bright as the Kansas sky. And then there was Lowell, 18, the boy everyone called Nice, a biology student with a talent for the bassoon. But nice boys don't kill their families, do they? I dug through the records, trying to understand him. LOL was a puzzle with missing pieces. He read voraciously, his nose buried in books like The Brothers Karamazov, Dostoevsky's Tale of Faith, Doubt, and Patricide. Friends said he was quiet, introspective, but no one saw the darkness brewing. You can't see inside a closed mind. His family thought he was content studying at a local college, but Lowell hated Walcott, its smallness suffocating his ambitions. He dreamed of escape, of a life bigger than the town's dusty roads. What makes a boy turn on his own blood? That Thanksgiving weekend, the Andrews house was warm with the scent of leftover turkey and pie. You can almost smell it, can't you? Jenny was home from the University of Kansas, sprawled on the couch with her parents, the TV flickering in the dark living room. They'd turned off the lights to mimic a theater, their laughter soft as they watched a movie. LOL wasn't with them. He was upstairs planning. In his bedroom, he sat at his desk, the pages of The Brothers Karamazov open before him. The novel's weighty questions, God, morality, murder, swirled in his mind, not as ideas, but as commands. You feel the shift, don't you? He closed the book, his movements deliberate, and walked to the bathroom. The mirror reflected a stranger. He lathered his face, shaving with his father's safety razor, each stroke precise as if preparing for a ritual. No nicks, no errors. LOL was meticulous. He was already gone. Back in his room, he put on a black suit bought for his college acceptance, its fabric crisp against his skin. He checked his reflection, smoothing his hair, ensuring every detail was perfect. You're watching a killer dress for death. From his closet, he retrieved a .22 caliber rifle and a Ruger pistol, their metal cold in his hands. He descended the stairs, his steps silent, his heart steady. The living room was dark, the TV's glow casting shadows on the walls. They didn't see him coming. William Opal and Jenny were lost in their movie, their backs to the doorway. LOL flicked on the light, and they turned annoyed, ready to protest. Then they saw the rifle. Jenny's eyes widened, her mouth opening, but before she could speak, LOL fired. One shot, and she was gone. The bullet punched through her skull, her body slumping on the couch, lifeless. You can't unsee that moment. William lunged his voice a desperate roar, but LOL was faster. 3 bullets tearing into his father's chest. Opal threw herself over her husband, her screams cut short by 3 more shots. The room was a graveyard now. Lol paused, his breath, even his face blank. He felt nothing. Opal stirred impossibly alive, staggering toward him, her hands reaching out. You'd fight for your family, wouldn't you? LOL didn't hesitate. 3 more bullets, and she fell, her blood pooling on the carpet. William, crawling toward the kitchen phone, was next. You can't escape him. LOL emptied his rifle, then drew the pistol firing until the clip was dry. He reloaded, shooting again, not out of anger, but curiosity, as if testing how many bullets a body could take. 17 for his father, 6 for his mother. A detective later said it was like LOL was conducting an experiment. His father's corpse, his subject. He stepped back, the room heavy with the smell of gunpowder and blood. You're standing in his shoes now. Lull opened a living room window, stacking garden furniture outside to stage a burglary gone wrong. He thought he was clever. He drove to his apartment in Lawrence, Kansas, a college town buzzing with life. There he built his alibi, borrowing his typewriter from a friend, claiming he needed it for an essay. You'd believe him, wouldn't you? He went to a movie theater, watching Martyra, chatting loudly with strangers, making sure they'd remember him. At the Kansas River, he dismantled his weapons, tossing the pieces off the Massachusetts Street Bridge into the dark water below. He thought he'd erased it all. Back at his apartment, Loel called the police, his voice calm, reporting a bad feeling about his parents' house. You can't fake innocence forever. When officers arrived, their faces grim with news of the murders. Loel's reaction was wrong, too flat, too detached. You'd cry, wouldn't you? He claimed he hadn't seen his family in weeks, citing a falling out, but the police saw through him. His bad feeling was too convenient, his eyes too empty. They arrested him, the cuffs snapping shut, as he protested his lies, unraveling like cheap thread. In custody, LOL held firm, denying everything. But truth finds a way. The family's pastor, Vario C. Dameron, sat with him, offering a Coke and a gentle question. You didn't do this, did you? You'd confess to someone you trust, wouldn't you? LOL broke his voice, monotone, admitting the murders. I'm not sorry, but I'm not glad either, he said. I just don't know why I did it. You feel the chill of those words. No remorse, no tears, just a void where a soul should be. The police were stunned, their questions met with shrugs, as if killing his family was no different from swatting a fly. The trial was a spectacle in Walcott. You can't look away from a monster. Lulol's defense claimed insanity, citing the brothers. Karamazov as a trigger, but the Menninger Clinic's Dr. Joseph Satin disagreed. He was sane, just broken. LOL was schizophrenic, yes, but fully aware when he pulled the trigger. His behavior before and after was too calculated, shaving, dressing, staging the scene. You can't fake that kind of control. The jury didn't buy the insanity plea. They saw a boy who'd planned murder executed it, and felt nothing. You'd convict him too, wouldn't you? Lull was sentenced to death, his appeals crumbling against the weight of evidence. Kansas doesn't forgive. On November 30th, 1962, at Lansing Correctional Facility, he faced the gallows. You can't outrun justice. His last meal was 2 fried chickens, mashed potatoes, green beans, and pie a la mode, simple like the boy he'd once seemed. He offered no final words, his face calm, some said, smiling as the rope tightened. You'll never forget that image. At 6'1" and 250 pounds, he hung longer than most the executioner's rope, straining under his weight. Rumors of a broken rope swirled, but the truth was simpler. L.L. Lee Andrews died unmoved to the end. I visited his grave once in Mount Salem Cemetery, Missouri. You'd feel it too, standing there. His parents and Jenny share a single tombstone, their names etched in stone. Lull's is separate, marked only with sun. Even in death, he's apart. I think of Richard Hickok and Perry Smith killers from In Cold Blood, who shared his prison. Hickok called him funny, a kid with no respect for life, not even his own. That's what haunts me. Hailuo wasn't a monster with claws or a shadow in the dark. He was a boy, one of us, until he chose to be something else. Close your eyes, and you'll see him smiling as the noose tightens a void in human form.